Hi guys, welcome back to the Caffeinated Classroom. If this is your first time here, my name is Marie. I'm a high school English teacher in San Diego, California, and I love books. Like, I love them. I love all types of books. Well, not all types of books, but I like a lot of different types of books. I love reading. I spent pretty much my college years reading college stuff, my early teaching years reading teaching stuff, my grad school years, which are still my early teaching years, reading grad school stuff. And it took me a while, like within the last couple of years, to get back into reading for me. And let's just say that the fire has been lit. And I am into it again. I was never really out of it. I just like couldn't wrap my mind around how do I sit down and read without falling asleep. Well, now I just kind of do let myself fall asleep unless I'm into a really good book. I have some books that I want to tell you about today that I have been reading this fall and that I plan to continue reading as the fall goes on. Some are books that I've read for my classroom, like that students, so that students could read them and I can incorporate them into some different units and that sort of thing. And some are just for me. So let's get started. Okay, so the first books that I'm gonna show you are, like I said, books that I have read for my students, like with them in mind. I do a lot of choice novel and just different choice reading units and activities in my classroom. In fact, one of the pillars of my classroom is student choice when it comes to reading. In fact, if this is something that interests you or that you are trying and you want some more insight and tips about, I'm gonna start talking about choice novel units that I have worked very hard to develop very, very soon. If you are not already following me on Instagram, head there at the Caffeinated Class. Follow me, I'll start talking about it very soon. Or head to my website, thecaffeinatedclassroom.com. Get yourself on my email newsletter list and you'll get that information in the next few weeks. So back to what we're talking about. My junior class this year is a new prep for me. It's a new subject that I am teaching. Well, I taught it a long time ago and I'm back to it. And I just kind of decided let's throw everything out and start over again. And so one of our first units this year was all about identity. So I wanted to find novels that our students could relate to that give the experience of what it is to be an American teenager or a teenager on American soil, right? And from all different or many different ethnic and cultural perspectives. So some books that, this is obviously not the whole entire list, but here are a few books that I read for that purpose. I'm gonna knock myself in the chin with this stack of books. So first one is called When Dimple Met Rishi, and I loved this sweet little book. It's formulaic in that you know it's a sweet love story. It's teenagers, they're gonna clash at first, and then they're gonna love each other, and then they're gonna grow apart, and then, you know what I mean? Like, you can see the storyline before you get there, but it does not make this book any less endearing. I fell in love with the characters. I thought that they were witty and bright and sweet, and my students who have been reading this think that it is just the sweetest book as well. They're like, I already know what's gonna happen and I don't wanna stop reading it. It was a quick read for me, especially. Some of my students read it in like a weekend, and it's just worth it. It's nice and it's sweet and it's witty, like I said, and I was a very big fan of When Dimple Met Rishi. This author has some different books too that I haven't checked out yet, but they all get like really great reviews. Loved it. Another one is called Darius the Great Is Not Okay, and this deals with some pretty heavy topics. I'm obviously not going to get into like describing the whole plot to you guys because you can look that up on your own. I'm just going to give you my perspective. Darius the Great Is Not Okay was great for my students to get a perspective into what it is to be a male of Middle Eastern descent in, for all purposes, contemporary United States, but also what it is to have mental illness. Darius, our main character, suffers from clinical depression, and he has a strained relationship with his family, especially his father, and he talks through it a lot. And that has been the biggest connection that I've seen my students making, is just like, wow, I have a relationship like that with my, you know, whoever, or wow, I've seen this play out with my friends and I can understand now why they never want to talk about it if this is what it feels like. Like, it was just very eye-opening. That said, we're seeing life in the world from the perspective of Darius, and Darius is not okay, and so it can be really heavy. So it's kind of something that I was talking to my group of students who was reading this one, and I said, listen, you're gonna have to look at your calendar each week that we're doing this 3-week unit of reading this book and see when you can take breaks from reading it, because it gets deep and heavy and dark and your heart breaks for what this character feels, and you might need to take moments of pause away from the book so that you don't sink down with him. And so they took that warning, and they had some great conversations. It was a very good book for students to talk about. Let me see, what else did I read for my students? Let's start getting into some fantasy and dystopia, shall we? This one, The Gracier, which is only about a year old. I think last October of 2019 is when it was published. The Gracier, I loved it. There's been some mixed reviews. People either love it or they feel very about it. I love it. I love it from the perspective of, it was very fast paced. I love the female protagonist is who she is no matter what, and she stands her ground, and yeah, she doubts herself on the inside, and so we get to see a strong female who isn't strong all the time but still regains that strength, right? Because it's not reality to see somebody who's strong all the time. That's just not how normal people are, or like real humans are. And we get to see her question her sanity. We get to see a lot of different elements and dynamics at play. I have to say, because I got myself used to reading like long saga type fantasy books, when this ended, it felt abrupt to me. But for my students, it's exactly the length it needs to be. It's a little bit long, so it challenges them. Let's see, it's 400 pages, 404. I was like, I'm ready for this to be 700 pages, just because I really fell in love with the character. She bugged me a little bit at first, because it was kind of like, okay, we get it, you think you're really smart, but then like, she is really smart, so that's fine. And my students are loving it. I have a couple students, because they're reading it right now in class. I have a couple students who are like, I really wish I had read that. Like, I'm reading, you know, such and such, and I really wish I had read that one. And I'm like, so read it when you're done. I have so many copies. Come to school, and I'll leave one for you, and you can come and borrow one of my copies. And they're like, okay, over Thanksgiving break, I can read it. I'm like, that sounds great, sweetie. So it's one of those that gets really infectious. I read this in about a day and a half, and I have 2 small children, as many of you know. So the fact that I read this that quickly, and I didn't even like gloss over stuff, I actually read it, which is not necessarily always true. I was a big fan. It is violent. It is kind of graphic. It's Lord of the Fliesy in that way, but it's not, I think it's worth the investment. Last but not least for my classroom, and I still need to finish this one. Don't tell my students, because they're still reading it too. But Children of Blood and Bone. I think I've talked about this on here before. It's just one of those, it's so good that when I sit down to read it, I'm gonna spend hours reading, because it's such a well-developed world, and the characters are intricate, and things are so interconnected that it's kind of adult novel-y in the, like, spiderweb of people that like all connect to each other, and if I don't pay attention, I forget, and I have to go back and I have to reread. There is nothing bad to say about this book that I can't finish it. It's just that I want to be able to consume it and like devour it all at once, and so then I get distracted by other things when I don't. I just need to like get over myself and read the whole book. Students reading it are in love. Like, it is long. It was the longest choice. It's over 500 pages. And so this is like a sophomore. The Gracier and this one are both sophomore choice books for the quarter that we're currently in. And they knew what they were getting themselves into, and that helped quite a bit in the trepidation in reading this in 3 weeks. But they're liking it. They're liking it quite a bit, and they like talking about it, and like they kind of get all like fangirly. It's really cute and sweet. So those are the 4 that I've read this fall for my classroom, for my students specifically. One more that's like teachery related, and then I'm gonna tell you about some of the books I'm obsessed with right now, just so you can go and get your hands on them. Oh, by the way, all of these are linked down below. I have an Amazon like store list thing. I'm like the worst at this. Anyways, it's linked down below. It's an affiliate link, but if you just want to see a little bit more about them, they're all in one. It's just called Bookstack. It's one of my lists on Amazon. Take a look, and you'll probably go down the rabbit hole that I do, which is like, once I see one, and then I see the ones that are suggested for it, and then hence my bedside table looks like a display at Barnes & Noble. one more. This is How to Read Nonfiction Like a Professor. I talked, I think in the spring of this year, about how to read novels like a professor. It just helps me with perspective of different things. You know, you kind of, as a teacher, you get into a little bit of a pattern and it gets a little bit like wah when you start like, okay, now in this article, what's the central idea? What rhetorical strategies, right? You just kind of like lose perspective of different things that you can find in an article and in nonfiction, and this kind of like reopens that a little bit. And I nerd out, you know, I like being nerdy about this kind of stuff. Okay, let's talk about some YA fantasy series, shall we? I stay up way too late at night reading YA fantasy, but I love it so much. So, one series that I've read, and I think there are 3 books, but then there are also prequels, is the City of Bones series by Cassandra Clare. I mean, the cover's ridiculous, but I loved it. It's, all of these books that I'm going to talk about have supernatural elements to it. This is one with like angels and like different beings with different levels and like fallen angels and people who are of the descent of angels and demon hunters, and like it's one of those like really intricate worlds that just draws you in. And each subsequent book, oh boy, each subsequent book has a little bit more like, you know, of the world that's like opened up. Love it. If you are a fan of Sarah J. Maas, these next ones are gonna be, well, this one probably too, but these next ones are gonna be for you. I don't have these 2 with me because I loaned them out to my friend. But the first one is called, oh gosh, I wrote it down. Now I can't think of it. Oh, duh. Serpent and Dove. Serpent and Dove. It's a land that looks a lot like this, but it's like Paris, I think, I wanna say 1800s, not 1700s, probably 1900s, France. And there are witches. There are witches, and those witches, there are witch hunts going on, and it's a good one. So Serpent and Dove is the first. The second book in the series is called Blood and Honey. Yes, Blood and Honey. Like I said, I lent both of those out to a friend, but I ate those books alive with no better way to say that. Like I killed them. The next set of books and the final in this little supernatural series that I have going on is From Blood and Ash. This series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This one's got vampires. So the first one was like angels and fallen angels, and then Serpent and Dove and Blood and Honey are witches and warlocks. This one is vampires, and it is perfect for the fall, or just really if you're looking for a little romance fantasy. I would not recommend. And maybe these ones could be recommended to students, but the other ones are like sexually explicit and quite violent. So you cannot recommend those to students, but I recommend them to you adults watching. So good. I'm on the second book From Blood and Ash. The second one is called A Kingdom of Fire and Flesh, or Flesh and Fire. And I stayed up way too late last night reading it, and I'm obsessed. I kind of think about the characters all the time, and I just love it because it's a way to not be on a screen, because I'm on a screen all day long. I love me some Netflix and Hulu, and I love binging TV, but lately I just can't do it. I sit with my little gooseneck book light, and I scrunch down in bed, and I read until the wee hours of the morning, and it fills my soul. So there you have it. That is my fall book stack. I'm waiting on a couple of books to come in. There's one more book that I'm going to be reading. It was from Book of the Month Club. I'll put my little link down below if you're interested in trying Book of the Month Club. It is called The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. You've probably seen that floating around social media. It's really good. I started it, and then the second book in this series came, and I was like, we're gonna put you on pause for a minute, and I'm gonna read this other one real fast. But when I'm done with the second book in the Blood and Ash series, I'll be reading The Secret Life of Addie Larue. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, if you wanna check out any of these books, I do have an Amazon affiliate link linked down below in the description box. And happy reading. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.